Welcome to Gambling with an Edge with your hosts Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin. Bob Dancer is America's premier video poker writer and teacher. He's written 10 books, including Video Poker for the Intelligent Beginner and the best-selling $1 Million Video Poker. He helped develop the computer software Video Poker for Winners, and in 2004 he was inducted into the Video Poker Hall of Fame. Richard Munchkin has been a professional advantage player for over 30 years and is in the Blackjack Hall of Fame. His book, Gambling Wizards, Conversations with the World's Greatest Gamblers, is a testament to the many ways you can succeed at gambling. The goal of the show is that you'll be a more knowledgeable gambler tomorrow than you were yesterday. And now, here are Bob and Richard.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Gambling with an Edge. I'm Bob Dancer.
And I'm Richard Munchkin.
Today we're talking Super Bowl proposition bets. And we have two guests, Michael Shackleford and Frank B. The reason we have two guests is that while I was asking Mike to be on the show to talk about this, Richard was asking Frank. So we worked out a format so they can both be on to discuss the Super Bowl props. First, let me introduce them. Michael Shackleford is an actuary who has analyzed a very large number of casino games and has established and maintains the wizardofodds.com website. Mike was also a co-host of Gambling with an Edge for more than a year. Frank B. is a well-known advantage gambler and is the editor/lead contributor to lvasports.com. Mike and Frank, welcome to Gambling with an Edge.
Thanks. It's nice to be back.
Thanks, Bob.
We're going to start with Shaq. We'll give you, say, 5 to 8 minutes to mention your best recommendation for Super Bowl 50 prop bets that are in existence today. So, Mike, the mic is yours.
Okay. First of all, the common one you see at every sports book is first score to be a touchdown. If you can find that at minus 140 or better, I would recommend betting that. I just got it at minus 130 at the Red Rock a couple days ago. The first of the many bridge jumpers, no two-point conversion. I would bet that at minus 350 or better, which is easy to find. I would put that fair at around minus 800.
Wow, minus 800.
Yes. Maybe it should be a little bit less because of this rule change, but even though with that rule change, with the extra point, most teams, including Carolina, Denver, are still just kicking the extra point after a touchdown. So that's what the model says. Another one I like small is there's a prop. Will both teams have the lead in the first half? I like the no on that. I would take that at minus 150 or better, which is easy to find. Another one I like small is the Carolina Panthers will have a touchdown in the first quarter. This is a rare one where I'm betting on something to happen. Next.
Wait, what price? What price?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thanks for asking. Take that at plus 120 or better, which I'm finding everywhere. Next one that I like a lot is Carolina under 4.5 punts. I would take that at plus 115 or better. And again, when I say these prices, these are prices that are pretty easy to find. I'm not throwing out, very difficult, hard to find lines here. So, every Super Bowl, I always like the under on the punts bets, both individual teams and total. Okay, next. Will Denver have a fourth quarter touchdown? No. I would take that at plus 120 or better. Next one, Denver under 19.5 first downs. I would, and I like this one medium. I would bet that at minus 135 or better. Next one, also some places have Denver under 20 first downs. I would, no, scratch that. This one is Denver, the first team to 20 points. I think it's the Coast/Boyd casinos that have this one. You can get plus 210 on it, which is strange considering the money line is only around 2-1. But I would I put that fair at plus 167, so at 210 I would say I like that medium.
Wait, so that was what again? That was
Denver is the first team to get to 20 points, or some places call this kind of punt the race to
20 points.
Yeah, the race to 20 points. A lot of places call it like the race to 8 points or 10 points. I think
We're blackjack players in this show. Can't we do it the race to 21?
I'd rather race to 20 than 21, right?
Yeah, it makes a difference in football. Okay, next. Denver to score in every quarter. I like the no moderately. I would bet that at minus 360 or better. Next one I like a lot is Denver punts under 5.5. I would bet that at minus 115 or better, which is very easy to find. I put that fair at minus 186, so I'm very enthusiastic about that one. Next one, Denver kicking points under 7.5. Bet that at minus 115 or better. I like that moderately. Next one, total field goals under 3.5. I would bet that at minus 125 or better. I would say I like
That's
that.
one you like in past years. We've heard this one.
In past years, I've just loved that one, and I'm becoming more lukewarm on it because all the kickers in the NFL have becoming so much better, and it's becoming routine to kick field goals at 50 yards, if not more, and so when I first started analyzing these prop bets with data from the year 2000, there were only about 3 field goals per game, and now it's more like 3.5. But I've got all this old data that is mixed into my program, so I'm more hesitant with these under on the field goal props and the kicking point props. But, for example, my program says this one is fair at minus 168, and you can get it at minus 125. That sounds like a great bet, but I'm sure that minus 168 is too high. Maybe it's something more like minus 145. But nevertheless, no matter what it should be, I think minus 125 is a very good price. I might add, last year there was only 1 field goal in the Super Bowl. But then again, in the game between Denver and Pittsburgh, there were 8, so you never know. Okay, here's a rare one where I like an over. Total first downs in the game over 39.5. I would take that at even money or better. Next, total punts under 9.5. I would also take that at even money or better. Other places have the punts line at 10. I would, again, take the under. I would bet under 10 at minus 140 or better. And finally, the 2 big bridge jumpers. I've got to say, bet the no safety. And yes, there have been 4 in the last 7 Super Bowls.
But also 4 in the last 20 or something like that.
Yes.
25.
Wow, very good. Yeah, there was one way back when, I guess 25 years ago. But yeah, mathematically speaking, I have to advise taking the no safety bet.
And what's the current line? And
it's ranging around between minus $7.50 and minus $9. So I would say take it at minus $8 or better. I mean, I think it's a very good bet at minus $9, but I would chop around a bit on that one. So I think the best I've found it is minus $7.50 so far. But if you see minus 800, grab it. So I put that one fair at minus 1583. So, and the other big bridge jumper, no overtime, I put that fair at minus 1614. You have to lay a little bit bigger price on this one this year, so I would take that one at minus 900 or better. So that's it.
All right. Now, before we get into Frank's picks, Frank, do you have any strong disagreement with one or more of Michael's picks?
No, I don't have any disagreements, but I do have a couple questions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so on one of the bets here, you had under 19.5 first downs. I guess that's by Denver, minus 135.
Yep.
And then further down, we're going over on first downs in the game. So does that mean you must love Carolina over on first downs?
Yeah, that's right. I don't perceive an advantage either way on the Carolina first downs bet.
What is the line? I mean, what is the over-under on the Carolina first downs?
I
Is it
thought
around
it was
21 or-
21 because the spread is -1 at Carolina, -1.5 on first downs. It varies from 1.5 to 2.5 is what I've seen out there. So let's call it 2 actually.
Well, they should add up to 40, right? I mean, the 19 and the over-under in first downs is 40 first downs for the game.
40.5 maybe.
40.5. So if it's 19.5 for Denver, shouldn't it be 21?
19.5 under.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the first time I've ever bet an over on first downs, but that's what my program says to do. So I would bet the total first downs over 39.5. I would bet that small, but nevertheless, that's what I'm saying to do.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the other thing was when it comes to the safety, you certainly would you agree that we should wait on that one until the public hits town because of how hot the safety's been and not only that it's run good, but it's run good in that it was the first score, then followed by the last score, followed by the first score, which is those are additional bets that had big long shot payouts that you see tickets posted on Twitter. They're not great bets, but they were winning after the fact winning bets. So would you recommend waiting on that one?
Yes, if you can. The price on the no overtime and no safety tends to drop the weekend of the game. So if you have the luxury of betting whenever you want to.
Yeah, because sometimes they have a fire sale on that at the end.
Yeah. My predicament is that I don't want to be left out, and I have piggybackers, and I like to organize, tell them what all their bets are before the game. So I'm usually kind of busy that Sunday morning. But yeah, I do think that. Yeah, I agree with you.
All right. So Frank, why don't you take 5 to 8 minutes and tell us what your best bets are that you would recommend for Super Bowl props that are out there right now.
Okay, out there right now. Well, Michael hit on what we call team-specific props. I primarily look at player-specific props, and I like to concentrate on them because I really believe that there can be bigger edges there. And if you keep on top of the teams and the player situations, there's going to be opportunity to take advantage of bets that are just mispriced. And the mispricing can come from using, and this sounds contrary to what statisticians would tell you, using too large a sample to make the line, or at the very least, improperly weighting the more recent and the more dated portions of your sample.
Well, that sounds like it would apply to what Michael was saying about field goals. That in the more recent years, they're kicking more field goals than in the older years. So,
yeah, okay. If you want to take a player and tell you an even more extreme example, take Peyton Manning. I mean, would you recommend using a 3-year sample to look at Peyton Manning's performance? You couldn't. 3 years ago, he threw 51 touchdown passes. That doesn't even resemble the guy that's on the field now. And you might not even want to use the entire 2015 season because things happened. I mean, there was injury. There was when he came back from the injury, a different style of play. He was so. And sometimes more is not better when it comes to players. Also, with player props, there is something of a built-in bias. You touched on it to under and no. And two factors.
A built-in bias for the smart bettor.
Right.
You bet the
right.
under
The public
public
mostly
bets more and over, and
Yep.
smart bettors bet under and no.
Right, but the way it bears out in the line is, okay, first off, you're free rolling the whole injury thing when you take unders and overs. When there's a couple of things that can happen in a game that will hinder your players' opportunities if you got the over, and none of them are good. Injury is obvious. Your guy gets injured, you've got a bet over on a running back, he gets injured. That's about it for you. And the other thing is game flow. In other words, let's say you have over on a running back, and that team falls way behind. Now there's less motivation, there's less good reason to run and more reason to throw the ball, or maybe a blowout game, and they just take him out just because, no sense in risking injury with this guy right now. That's not going to apply in the Super Bowl. We're not going to take anybody out, but
Or he could be disqualified. That doesn't happen a lot, but in some of the playoffs games, it should have happened.
Right? The point is, though, none of those things help your over bet. They help your under bet, and they help the no bet. So as far as the market goes, the average bettor strongly gravitates towards yes and over. On player props, there's a number of reasons, but mostly it's just the way public thinks. Who's going to do well? Who do I want to bet on? You don't hear the average guy out there saying, "Boy, who should I bet against?" They're looking to bet on somebody that they can cheer for. And then a second factor that's come into play in recent years is DFS. Okay, guys who analyze DFS, they're looking for the guys who are going to go off. Okay, they're not looking for the guys who are going to fail, and they probably know who that is. But they concentrate on guys who are going to go off and not just exceed the median, but those guys with big upside who are they think can have a breakout game. So win those big multi things. So that's a little bit of why I like player props and under in particular in player props. As far as bets go right now, and you want to stick to things that are out there, I still think there's a lot of bets, and many of them I couldn't. There's no point in bringing up because those lines are no longer available. But a few that are, here's a couple that are still worth it, I think. In general, I'm going to fade Ted Ginn Jr. In the passing game. And when you're betting player props, it's all about opportunity and opposition. Opportunity, how much is this guy going to have the opportunity to either rack up or lack of opportunity to keep your bet under? Ted Ginn has a median targets per game of 6.5 through the course of this season. There's no point in looking any farther back than this season because last season he didn't have near the snap count that he has this year. So, but 5 of the last 6 games, he has had 3 targets or less. So he's doing, he's getting half the targets that he was earlier in the year, actually more than that. But he has had his highest volume games against teams with poor pass defenses, which Denver is not one. His 3 biggest target games were against the Giants, the Saints, and the Colts. And those teams rank 32, 29, and 20 in yards per pass attempt. Denver is not like those teams. Denver is number 1 in yards per pass attempt, number 1 in yards per completion. So it's a whole different deal going against arguably the toughest team to pass on. Versus top-tier pass teams, Ted Ginn just doesn't get the opportunities. In Seattle recently, Arizona recently, he had 1 and 2 targets in those games. So as far as how to bet Ted Ginn under, I prefer to bet him under on volume, which means take him under on pass receptions. Your second choice would be to take him under on yardage. But he can break one big one and throw that thing over. But I was forced to take it under 52.5 early because people are familiar. When the first props go up at the Westgate, and that's last Thursday night, and everybody gathers there. They have the highest limits, and they have fairly sharp numbers relative to the rest of the city. When the props went up, everybody gets in line. When you get in line, when you get to the window, you get to make 2 bets. Then you have to get at the back of the line. Now, there's 400 bets up there. So you got to make a list.
So you don't want to be number 1 in the line because you don't have time to look through all the bets, right?
That's another factor that's this year that it was much more difficult than years past because the board used to be in front of you. Now they did the remodel. The board they put them up is on the far opposite side, and you can't really see it. So guys were either employing runners to stand in line for them or go back and forth. But the point is there's 400 bets up there, and you get 2. So you have to prioritize what you're going to bet when you get up there, because with 25 to 30 guys in line, which there are, there's going to be 50 to 60 hits before you get your next shot at 2 bets. So you want to take the ones that you think are going to expire quickly. And for me, Ted Ginn up there was lined at 3.5 receptions. I was already hot for him to bet him under, and so he was on my list. By the time I got up there, it had been hit twice already. So there were 8, and I was 10th in line. So
Jesus.
There were 18 bets were made among 350 to 400 available, and 2 of them were on the exact same thing I had zeroed in on. And after the fact, I came to understand that Cantor, CG Technology, had actually put their props up about 90 minutes before Westgate, and they're available on the app. So when I looked up Ginn on the app, I saw that they opened him at 2. So that's what the line I made him. So when I saw 3.5, I was like, I got to get that. But I imagine that there were at least one or maybe both guys in line that had the app in hand and saw 2 on the app, 3.5 on the board, and go, well, I'm going to have to move Ted Ginn up my list because I want to just make this middle, because it's a monster. It's a monster combo going over 2 and under 3.5. That's plenty good.
Yeah.
So I ended up with under 52.5 on Ted Ginn because that was up there and it had not been hit yet, and it's still anti-Ted Ginn, but I just would have preferred to have the other one. Now,
what was the
price?
Reception?
The price on both were minus 110.
What was the receptions down to by the time you got
minus
to
155. So it's 3.5 under 55. They usually move it 15 cents on the first hit and 20 on the second.
Oh, so they didn't move the number of receptions; they just moved the line.
Yeah, my guess is they moved it 3.5 under a quarter after the first hit, and then 3.5 under. Well, actually, when you think about it, he might have taken 3 hits. It moved 45 cents. So anyway, it moved a lot, enough to where I said, well, if I want that, I can get that later.
Yeah.
So I took under 52.5 instead. Now currently, you can still get Ted Ginn under 3 flat. It's not easy to find, but it's out there. Most places have him under 3, juiced a little more. You can get under 49.5 receiving yards, and I think that's good. Obviously, if I made the line 2, I don't think he's going to get 25 yards a catch. So under 49.5 or under 3, I think those are still worth it. So the second bet that I want to talk about is sort of related to that, and it's Ted Ginn Jr. to have a rushing attempt. So it's a yes. And the raw numbers from this year would say that bet should be plus 200. In other words, 1 out of every 3 games he was getting a rushing attempt. But there's a couple factors that I think makes that more likely in this game. And one is that he's simply a guy that has real big play potential for them. He's a punt returner, and the whole thing about him in the receiving game is he's not the greatest route runner. He does have he is prone to the case of the dropsies from time to time, but once you get the ball in his hand and get him in space, that's the way. That's your objective. The easiest way to do that, if he's going to have difficulty getting the ball via the pass, is just hand it to him. Now, in recent games, they've been more prone to handing him the ball, and they've had some success with it. He has had 3 carries in the last 5 games, and he scored a TD in the most recent game. So they gave him an end around, and so for this bet, the reduced opportunities in the passing game, coupled with the recent success handing him the ball, make yes a bet I was looking for right away, and I took plus 280 on that at Westgate. I think somebody hit it after me, and it was down to plus 200. But I actually make this line closer to like minus 130. No, I'm sorry, plus 130. So I still think there's plenty of value to take him plus 200. Now you can see it around town in varying prices. It's plus 200 is like the best I've seen right now, but I've seen as low as plus 50 and 60. So you got to shop around for it. But I still think that's one that's worth.
By plus taking. 50, you mean plus 150?
Right.
Okay. Good. Just
so those are 2 right there that I took right away that I still think have some value.
All right. So before we go on, Shaq, you have the right to disagree with either or both of those, or generally do you think he's probably right on?
Yeah, I absolutely have no disagreements. As you mentioned, I'm not big on the player props. In fact, I wanted to ask you a question about this. As I used to be, as I read Stanford Wong's Sharp Sports Betting way back when, and he basically advocates using the Poisson distribution to analyze things like will Cam Newton throw an interception. So I would look at how many interceptions has he thrown, say, in the last 2 years, divided by how many games he's played, and do a mathematical analysis on that. And frankly, my results using that method were not very good. And that's why I said, to heck with all these player props. I'm sticking on things that are just very mathematical. So my question is, what is your opinion about someone who really doesn't know the players very well and is just looking at averages for a whole season or two?
Yeah. See, I really think it's a two-step process. Like I mentioned earlier, I said my raw number for Ginn reception was plus 200. Mm-hmm. That's the statistical. That's taking it, whatever you think is the best way to approach it as far as the length of the sample. And most of the time, it's just find the median for that sample and maybe look for something really extreme that you need to consider. But for the most part, just make a raw number. Then the second part, that's where you tweak it and you adjust it for current form, injuries in and out, new opportunity, less opportunity, those type of things. So I really think it needs to, when you're winning the players, I really believe it has to be a two-step process. You start out with a raw number, and then you apply all the adjustments.
So if you're not knowledgeable enough about football to do that tweak, would you recommend just leaving player props alone?
You know what? The approach that you have and the approach that I obviously have, if you want to play them, certainly almost every time, look for a reason to bet under, look for a reason to bet no. It's all, and you could also use other books, sharp books, as a barometer, and just play them that way. But I think if you're thinking of making your own line and just starting with a raw line and going with that, I think you could get yourself in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, Frank, let's assume you found a prop bet that compare the total rushing yards for Peyton Manning versus the Carolina Waterboy. And we're going to make the assumption that the Waterboy will end up with exactly 0 yards. How would you go about analyzing that bet?
Okay, well, first off, that's a real bet. That is a real bet.
You're serious.
That I found, and I shared it with Bob, and we thought it would be interesting to talk about. Obviously, when you listen to the wording of it, Peyton Manning rushing yards, the real bet is Peyton Manning rushing yards -0.5 versus the Carolina Waterboy. And, okay, so it could be the Carolina, but it could be Hillary Clinton, it could be the Pope, it could be Richard Munchkin. It wouldn't matter. I mean, we're saying that, he's going against somebody who's going to get 0 yards. So the bet is actually Peyton Manning over under 1.5 rush yards. And that's the way you look at it. And you do just as Mike and I were just talking about. You make a raw number, and then you adjust for it. And I've made a number on Peyton Manning rushing yards, and I make it a -0.5 yard. And in fact, that half a yard to 0, and then the next half a yard to half, it turns out it's pretty big.
So can you bet the Waterboy?
Well, I attempted to, and I think the guy smelled a rat or something, because he wouldn't let. I told him, like, listen, I just want to get a few of these. I'm not trying to play games. I just want to get a few $20 bets here just to hand out to friends, because it's the most unique one that I've found so far, and I like to hand some of those bets out before Super Bowl. And he went back there and he took the bet down. I think he smelled a rat. I don't know. I think he thought. So I
for
suspect,
$20.
Well, I told him it was about a few of them.
Oh.
But I suspect if I go back there that it's back up, and then I'll be able to bet it. I probably just shouldn't have said anything, because the guy is already a little wary of me to start, and then he probably thought there was a mistake there. But I would have taken +0.5 with the Waterboy. Peyton Manning, over the course of the regular season, had -6 yards rushing. All 10 games, he never accumulated positive rushing yardage. So every game was 0, -1, -2, whatever. Okay. In the postseason, he had a -1 in the game versus Pittsburgh, and then this last game, And this is important when it comes to props. The thing that sticks in the bettor's mind, the average bettor's mind, is what's happened most recently. And he had a 12-yard run for a first down, and his first probably real attempt at running the ball this year, and it just so happened to go for a first down in the AFC Championship game. So it was noticed. So now you're going to get some bets, going into Super Bowl that have something to do with Peyton running the ball. They shouldn't put anything up having to do with Peyton running the ball. He's not looking to run the ball. He all his rushes are pretty much kneels, and he's smart enough to just throw the ball away if he thinks he's going to have to run. Only a run born out of absolute necessity is going to make him take off. He's just not going to run the ball. On the way in here, he was on the radio being interviewed, and he was joking about it. He says, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure after that rumble I had last week, they're going to have a spy on me for this game." He knows it's a big. It was a complete fluke that he did that. So, the result is that we're going to get a bet or two out there that guys are going to get cute with and put it up. And I think this guy made a mistake, late making him -0.5. So, if I get a chance, I am going to bet that one.
For more than 20?
For more than 20 this time. Yeah.
Seems like you need to send someone in to bet it for you.
Perhaps.
All right. So let's deal with a hypothetical. Let's assume that both the Denver-New England game and the Carolina-Arizona game went the other way. So our Super Bowl was New England versus Arizona rather than Denver versus Carolina. In that scenario, there would be well over 90% chance that Arizona would get the ball first, because Bruce Arians pretty reliably takes the ball first when he gets the chance. Bill Belichick normally defers when he gets the chance. How would that make your handicap different for that kind of a game versus the Denver-Carolina game we actually have? Frank, I'm going to let you start with that and then see what Mike has to say.
Okay, so the whole receive-defer thing is not an issue in this game. Denver and Carolina pretty religiously defer. So we don't have to deal with all the bets that you would be concerned with as far as who's going to do this first, who's going to do that first. And the Super Bowl is the only game of the year where they actually have bets that read who will receive the opening kickoff. Okay, so just imagine Arizona and Denver make it. Pretty strong bet. And you can keep, and there's no telling where the people would stop betting it. As far as other bets go, you saw, like I said, the menu at Westgate's 400 bets, and a lot of them have to do with who's going to do what first. Now, one thing that I did notice at Westgate, they usually pit one guy on one team against his counterpart on the other, who's going to catch a pass first. This is the first year they haven't had a whole slew of those. They decided to scrap it, and I believe that it has something to do with the possibility of a receive-defer situation. So, in other words, if you would have had Jericho Cotchery against Owen Daniels, who's going to catch a pass first? Well, if you know who's going to get the ball first, that's a pretty simple analysis on the bet. And the last time that it came up was the most recent Giants and Patriots game, where the Giants, Tom Coughlin takes it. Belichick religiously at that time defers. So we knew the Giants were going to get the ball, and everybody made all those bets. And really dominated Super Bowl betting during that year was the race to get all these bets in on who's going to do what first. Because that they think, hey, we got a huge piece of information here.
The book didn't
It's amazing.
I find that just mind-boggling.
When you think about it, even if they start and pick them, which they do on those matchups, one bet pushes it to $1.35, the next one pushes it to $1.50. Pretty soon you're getting close to $2. I mean, when does it stop? It does stop at a certain point. So it's not like it's an endless stream of bets. They're going to keep raising it till you stop betting. But that's the thing. You look at it and you try to find the things that are a little not so obvious that pertain that applies to that receive defer thing. So that's how I would look at that.
All right. Shaq, did you have any comment on that particular item?
Yeah, no. As I recall, that was the situation last year, but and unfortunately, I was not on the boat with that last year. But
it wasn't as certain in the season.
Yeah, didn't the Patriots receive against, I don't remember who, but in one of the playoff games.
Just recently.
Yeah, the very last game.
He threw a big curve this last game against Denver, comes out, wins the toss, and takes the ball. That hadn't happened. It happened one time earlier this year, I believe, against Jacksonville, and it was clearly, I think, a weather situation. Prior to that, he had gone, it might have been years without taking the ball.
Yeah, I didn't feel comfortable betting that last year, not knowing why he occasionally wants to receive.
Well, he doesn't really give informative press conferences, so he doesn't tell. All right, we're going to have a question. We're going to let Shaq answer it first this time about no overtime. In the first 49 Super Bowls, there have been exactly 0 overtime so far. According to Square Bettors, that makes it a virtually 100% certain there won't be an overtime this year.
No, the Square Bettors say it's due.
Now, it's not 100%. How does public perception of this bet help or hinder the advantage gambler?
I don't think that the Square Bettors necessarily are thinking, there's never been an overtime in the Super Bowl. For example, as I mentioned before, there have been 4 out of the last 7 Super Bowls have had a safety, and 0 have had an overtime. If you look at all NFL games in general, they both have just about the same probability at about 6.5%. And the prices on them are about the same. And I think the behavior you see with that bets is like what Frank said before, is Square Bettors are betting on things to happen. They want to root on something to happen, not on something to not happen.
Well, and they like the big payoff.
Yes, and they love the big payoffs. That's why most of these bets I also say I'm laying odds, because the Square Bettors don't like to lay odds. They like to win big or lose. So, I think it's more of a psychological thing.
Do you have any comment on that, Frank? Or
no. What Richard said is true. The other part of it is that they want to take the odds. It's very similar to a mismatched prize fight, where one's like just recently the Rousey Holly Holm fight. Every small bettor, they didn't want to lay 900 with Rousey. It turned out this time they're right, but they took Holm plus 550, Holm plus 600, Holm whatever it was. They don't want to bet $20 to win 3. They want to bet $20 to win 100. And, it overwhelms any other thought of how they think the fight actually going to go. They're saying, I'm not betting $20, $30 to win a $5 bill, So that's the thinking there, and that's what, that's why that when they start to do things like compare ticket count to dollars spent on an event, you'll say, well, the ticket count is overwhelming on Holly Holm. It's 10-1. Yeah, it is, and they're all $10 and $20 bets, and then the big bets are all at minus 800. All
right, so we keep putting the commercials earlier and earlier, so people have a reason to stick around and listen to them and come back, because we still have a lot more questions for Frank and Mike. But we're going to do a few commercials first, and there was a math problem in here that I was smart enough to check with Shaq before I'm reading this, and since he agreed with me, I feel a whole lot better. South Point has more than 10,000 games, returning more than 99%. This is more than anybody else has. The big promotion at South Point in February is for locals who already get mailers. You pick up your regular mailer Monday through Friday of each week, and if you do so, Monday through Wednesday of each week, and if you do that, you get an equal-sized play amount on Friday or Saturday. For those who pick up all 8 of those, you get an additional big amount to pick up on February 29th. If you get the top mailer, $75 a week, instead of getting your normal $300 a month, this time you get $1,350 in February. This does require a total of 5 more trips for that extra $1,000, but most locals would find a way to make those extra trips. They're offering double points for my birthday, Monday, February 15. Of course, the casino calls it President's Day rather than Bob Dancer's birthday. But what do they know? I know the truth, and now so do you. The free video poker class this week will be beginner double bonus poker at noon on Wednesday and beginner double at 2 o'clock on the same day. Although the games sound familiar, the strategies are significantly different from each other. Understanding the basics of these games is valuable for understanding classes later in the semester, such as Double-Double Bonus Quick Quads and Double-Double Bonus Ultimate X, which actually has a strategy closer to Double Bonus than Double-Double Bonus. Everyone at least 21 years old is welcome at the Palms. From now until the end of April, they have drawings every Friday and Saturday night at 7:15. You must be present to win. 5 winners, top prize $2,500, total prize value $5,000, plus a chance for all 5 of those to win $1 million in a match game. The way the $1 million match game works is that each of the 5 winners each night get a board of 20 envelopes. 5 of them are good to get, 15 bad to get. If you get all 5 good envelopes, it's 15,503 to 1. You get $1 million in cash. This part of the drawing has an EV of about $65. If you don't win the million, each of the good envelopes you find is worth $100. Most players will get, the average is about $125 on that. So your total EV is $190 for this bonus round. But it comes with dreams of winning $1 million. Play for prizes now until February 12th. Macy's gift cards, Monday through Friday. February 15 to 26, you earn Lowe's gift cards. Cards redeemed at a rate of 0.2%, up to $190 per day. You keep the points. This next Sunday, February 7th, everyone gets a surprise multiplier. You may earn up to 40,000 bonus points on video poker and no limit on slots. At videopoker.com, it's the best place to play a lot of games. If you sign up for the gold membership, $8.95 a month or $79.95 a year, this allows you to get corrections on most of the games. It's a good place to practice quick quads, for example. You can get the strategy from me or from Shaq's website, but if you want correction, go to videopoker.com. The game of the week is the 5-play version of Wheel Poker. This is a 7-coin per line game where you get to spin the wheel every time you end up with 4 of a kind. The values on the wheels range between 100 and 2,000, but the spots are not equally weighted. The average spin amount is 428 coins. The strategy is not the same as regular video poker. If you were playing Bonus Poker Deluxe, for example, you need to figure the strategy as though the 4 of a kind return 828 rather than 400. That leads to a number of strategic changes, such as holding the kings only from King, King, 774. Although squares would hold the kings only anyway, good players normally from that hand would hold 2 pair. On the wizardofodds.com website, you can find a description of the game and how much the various pay schedules of the game return. All right, we're talking to Frank B. and Michael Shackleford. Let's talk about...
I just wanted to ask about Ted Ginn. I noticed they also have a Ted Ginn, will he score a touchdown? On the sheet here, it's plus 160, minus 180. Do you have any opinion on that at all, Frank?
Sure. I made him score a touchdown plus 200. So, if anything, it's getting close to where I'd bet the no.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. There's a rule change on extra points this year. Instead of kicking it from the 2-yard line, you kick it from the 15-yard line. Instead of extra points at a 99% rate or whatever it was, it's now significantly lower than that. Now, this changes the price on whether there'll be a misconversion or whether there'll be a successful 2-point conversion or perhaps even if there'll be an overtime. Are the lines on these bets significantly different this year compared to what they were previous years, Frank?
The only thing that I've noticed on this is I think they do have a missed extra point up there, but I don't want to quote the wrong line, but I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of no minus $4. But the one thing that I think they did have to adjust a little is, will there be a 2-point attempt? I think they should adjust it just a little. That's because there are we're going to have to see the condition of the field, which is actually an issue this year because they're going to have a big concert on the field the night before the game, and I don't know what they're going to do to protect that field because there are complaints from most recently the Baltimore Ravens kicker that said that's the worst kicking conditions on an outdoor field that I've played on all year. They're resodding the field, but then the concert people are going to take over on Saturday night. But I don't think that there should be really that much of an adjustment on either.
Shaq?
Yeah, to add to that, the probability of making the extra point didn't go down that significantly.
94%.
There you go. So most teams, including these two, are still going for the extra point. So I don't think that we need to adjust the 2-point conversion line very much.
Well, in an earlier playoff game, the Steeler coach got quite a bit of flack after the fact for not going for 2 points. Now, whether or not that was just after they know the score, recreate what they should have done beforehand or not, I would think coaches are going more for it now. Aren't coaches going more for 2-point conversions now?
I think Pittsburgh likes to go for them, but they're not playing in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, well, that Tomlin set himself up for that because early in the season, the beginning of the game, in the first quarter, he'd score a touchdown, he'd go for 2. They go so then talk began. Hey, Mike Tomlin's one of those guys who believes he can make better than 50% of these, so he's going to go for them unless it really necessitates. He really needs just that 1 point, and that sort of tapered off as the year went by. But then when it came down to the playoff game and in what many thought was an obvious situation to go for it.
Well, it was like basically the last play of regular time, so a single point would have tied the game going to overtime, and a double point would have ended it right there.
Oh. Well, I think you kick it, no?
People argue.
You're saying this was to tie the game and send it to overtime?
Yes, whereas 2 points would have ended the game. And
94% chance that you send it to overtime.
Well, but 94% chance that you win half the time, right?
It depends who you're playing against. If you're playing against a stronger team.
So,
I don't go for the 2-point conversion.
If you're better than 50% to convert the 2, then that seems clearly a better play.
Well, that's the number. That's the variable there. Did he believe he was 50%, 48%, or what it is? Something about it didn't strike him as being very attractive, though.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, Belichick would go for it, right?
It's hard to tell what he would do.
That was the discussion before the season started. That when a coach got put in that position, would he make the mathematically correct thing? And many coaches wouldn't because they're afraid of afraid of failure.
Yeah, you could lose your job, right?
Yeah.
If you're, I mean, I don't know that Belichick could lose his job.
Belichick's pretty bulletproof.
Yeah, but I mean, no, I mean, a lot of coaches, I think, would make the wrong call just because they know they could lose their job. It's why casinos throw players out that they know are losing players, but they just don't want the action that big, So,
yeah, at the beginning of the season, I wrote extensively on this topic, arguing that it was the correct mathematical play in general to go for the 2-point conversion, and
all the time.
But in general, I'm not saying all the time. There's exceptions, but if I just looked at league averages, I showed that there was a greater than 50% chance of making a 2-point conversion. Also considering the probability of missing the extra point, but it was very marginal. But that's what I concluded. But they also say that a coach is only as good as his last game. So when you take a risk in coaching, much like in the gaming business, it's the safe thing to do to not take a chance.
Well, it's like punting, right? Because often it's right to go for the 4th down.
Yes,
is better than punting, but they, again, like you say, but I think football is approaching, baseball changed with the whole Moneyball thing, right? And now things that are taken for granted 10 years ago would have gotten you fired, and now everybody's like, oh, well, of course, we know that, and I think 10 years from now, people will be doing that in football. They'll look back on it and, and think, oh, those guys were idiots back then,
Yeah, you can see it. You see it taking hold in all sports. The Houston Rockets last year were a team that they made a concerted effort to either take a three or take something much closer as far as a shot. There was no more of these shots. They were, the edict was no more of these shots 1 foot inside the 3-point line. They make 0 sense, percentage-wise.
Right.
So, yeah, you see it taking hold in basketball, and I certainly think that there's a lot of room to implement it in football.
Oh.
All right. I was looking online at the opening lines at the Westgate. Surely they've moved a lot since then, but I'm still wondering about one of them or group of them in particular. If you wanted to bet at opening whether there was going to be a field goal by either team in the first quarter, the price was minus 120. In the third quarter, same price, minus 120. But if you wanted that same bet in the second quarter, it was minus 300, which is significantly different than minus 120. Now, as a casual fan, that strikes me as an unusual anomaly. Frank, was this line a big mistake, or is there an obvious reason why there's so many field goals in the second quarter?
It's not a mistake. There's two obvious reasons why there's more field goals in the second quarter. The first is at the start of the quarter, the field position is not known. At the beginning of the first quarter, most likely we're going to be starting the ball in the 20, and that starting position there is bad relative to most other positions on the field. And the second quarter, you could start it
the 3-yard
inside
line.
the red zone.
Yes.
Okay, or anywhere between there and probably the 20. Once in a while, you get bad. You'll catch bad, and it'll be be pinned back inside the 20. But for the most part, on average, you're going to have better starting field position than that 20, 21-yard line that you start the game with. And the second, probably even more important factor is that it's the scramble at the end of the second, at the end of a half. In other words, inside the 2-minute warning, they run the drill to try to get down there and get something before the end of the half because you do not retain field position going into the next quarter. You lose the ball. At the end of the first quarter, there is no scramble because it just ends. You have to turn around and you pick it up right where you left off. At the end of the half, it's either score, we're going to halftime, and we start with the kickoff then. So those two reasons are why two of the primary reasons why there's more scoring in the second half and hence more field goals.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. By the way, I put the fair line at minus 240 on a field goal in the second quarter, compared to, say, plus 109 in the first quarter.
So there was method to those lines, and they had it approximately right.
Yeah, there's also another prop that says, will there be a score within the last 2 minutes of the first half? And it's like minus 200, yes. So think about that. Is there any 2-minute sector in a game where you'd lay 2-1? There's going to be a score in it. No, it's only the last 2 minutes of that half,
or the last 2 minutes of the game.
Kneel downs. Both teams in the first half want to score almost every game. That's not the case in the fourth quarter. Sometimes they're just kneeling.
That's true. All right, Richard, we got less than a minute to go. How can people get our stuff?
First of all, we welcome and encourage your questions. You can send them to us at gamblingwithanedge@gmail.com or facebook.com/gamblingwithanedge, or you can tweet them at me at RWM21. You can get the show delivered to you automatically every week by signing up at iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, or at my site, richardmunchkin.com. Or you can get an archive of every episode ever done at bobdancer.com.
All right. Thank you, Frank B. Thank you, Michael Shackleford. I learned a lot today. I suspect they might have learned a lot from each other. I'm not sure. I hope our listeners learn. Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Go out and hit lots of royal flushes, everybody. Good night.
You've been listening to Gambling with an Edge with your hosts, Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin. Subscribe to the show in iTunes, and episodes will be delivered to you automatically every week. Archived versions of past shows may be found at bobdancer.com and richardmunchkin.com. We welcome emails at gamblingwithanedge@gmail.com. Bob Dancer and Richard Munchkin are both available on Facebook and welcome your questions. The sponsors for the show are the South Point Hotel, Casino and Spa, the M Resort, the Palms Casino Resort, and the website videopoker.com. Join us again next week for another Gambling with an Edge.
Views and opinions expressed on this program were those of the hosts and guests and did not necessarily reflect those of Vegas All Net Radio, its affiliates, or its parent company.